Security versus privacy, that age-old argument, topping the agenda on both sides of the Rhine. Here in France, Parliament approving a bill spelling out a legal framework for intelligence gathering, more specifically, cyber snooping, with the setting up of a commission to issue warrants and the mass monitoring of the big phone and internet operators for, quote, suspicious patterns. But how wide a net do you cast when you take into account that the Paris terror attack suspects had all been monitored at some point, but planned their attacks using the cell phones of wives and girlfriends? Supporters of the bill hail the long overdue legal framing of surveillance. Opponents call it a French Patriot Act that's intrusive and unenforceable, unless, of course, there's mass recruitment of police and magistrates. Is this the society we want to live in? Yes, according to surveys. And despite protests like those we've seen outside of Parliament, a recent poll found 2/3 of the French favor more surveillance. Now, that's not the mood in Germany, where the ruling Grand Coalition is feeling the strain of a spy scandal, where it's reported that on Chancellor Merkel's watch, Berlin spied on the European Commission, the French, and possibly private companies, all on behalf of the NSA, the same U.S. agency whose techniques were outed by whistleblowing intelligence subcontractor Eric Snowden. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at France's Patriot Act, or whether it is one, with David Nakache, cryptologist who teaches the University of Paris. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome back as well to Fabrice Appelboin, who teaches information warfare.
Thanks for
at
having
the
me.
French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Always a pleasure. We're pleased to be joined today from London by Eva Bloom-Dumontet, Advocacy Officer at Privacy International. Tell us what Privacy International is.
So Privacy International is an NGO that actually fights for the right to privacy. We fight against surveillance, and yes, we defend the right to privacy across the world.
All right, we'll also be checking in with our Berlin correspondent, Jessica Saltz, who will give us the latest, again, on a scandal that's putting a strain on that GroKo, that Grand Coalition in Germany. The France 24 debate, where you can weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. There was little suspense when the vote happened. 438 for, only 86 against. That surveillance bill sailing through the French Parliament, and that pleasing, of course, the Prime Minister Manuel Valls.
The National Assembly has decided it must rally in support of this efficient, purposeful law that the French people have been waiting for. I am also glad there was a spirit of responsibility. Despite the sometimes pointless controversies, the intolerable accusations such as those which said the law would kill civil liberties, and also the pressure we saw being put on parliamentarians yesterday.
The pressure being those protests outside. Now, there were dissenting voices, not just outside of Parliament, but inside. And as Josh Fardy reports, the devil's in the detail when it comes to regulating the spying game.
On March the 19th, French Prime Minister Manuel Valls outlined a new intelligence law. He said the aim was to protect French citizens while respecting their liberty. Under the bill, private residences can be monitored, geolocation used, and mobile communications can be intercepted, not just those of a suspect, but acquaintances of that person too. Web usage and online communication can also be monitored with the help of so-called black boxes. These can be plugged into the networks of service providers, website hosts, and other major online services. Their aim is to identify suspicious behavior among internet users. The bill's authors deny it will be used for mass surveillance. Rapporteur Jean-Jacques Urvoas says this is not a French version of the US Patriot Act.
We are not going for widespread monitoring because the US has shown that to be useless. This is not going to be run on a predictive basis. We simply aim to ensure enhanced monitoring for those identified as threats.
There's also controversy over the bill's purpose. It details 7 situations in which monitoring can be employed. Those aren't only for the prevention of terrorism and reasons of national security, but also for foreign policy purposes and economic and scientific interests as well. These reasons are much too vague for renowned anti-terrorist judge Marc Trévédic.
The state may be tempted to watch over opponents of social movements or get political intelligence on protest movements at any given moment.
An independent so-called control commission will be created to oversee the law's implementation, but will have no legal binding power.
No legally binding power. Lots to talk about from that report by Josh Vardy. David Nekash, first of all, your reaction to what we heard there, that investigating magistrates say, how it's way too vague, and we could find ourselves in the same situation, I guess, as Germany, where instead of spying on would-be terrorists, they're spying instead on competitors in industrial espionage.
So there are several ways to interpret it. Either indeed this is a tool which is going to be used for spying on industrial or scientific targets, or it is simply a message to say, if you do it, we can do it as well. It can be just a deterrence as well. We don't know. There is no way to know. As is the law actually lists 7 cases in which the surveillance can be triggered.
But it is vague when they say things like foreign policy.
It's very vague.
What do you think of the bill?
Well, I'm mostly a technician. I'm dealing with cryptographic algorithms, with information security in its implementation, and so on. There are 2 things. If secrets are not revealed and if communications cannot be eavesdropped or wiretapped, then you're sure that your privacy is preserved. If you remove actually this lock or this security, what happens is that you pass to human trust or trust in organizations. This is much more difficult to control and to audit. This is where the debate is today. It has to be clearly separated between the technical challenge in itself and, on the other hand, surveillance. Now, if you look at the bill and what the bill tries to implement, if you really want to protect against eavesdropping, as mentioned by this bill, we dispose today of the technological tools that can be deployed by individuals and organizations to avoid many of the measures that could be implemented by using those tools.
How so? Explain.
Encryption, onion routing, anonymous proxies. There are plenty of ways and tools that can allow you to escape surveillance or to limit the amount of information and metadata that you're going to leak to those agencies.
So you're saying that trawling for big data is not a panacea?
No, actually what happens is that you can imagine very well that today your email can be eavesdropped. If it is not by the French state, it can be eavesdropped by foreign powers. So we already need to protect against this kind of surveillance by powers that actually do not use this bill. So this bill is only going to say that in France we are going to be able to deploy the same type of surveillance against which protections exist today.
Fabrice Appelboin, they said a legal framework was long overdue in France.
Unfortunately, it's true. I mean, everything that is now legal is already happening for several years. There is already mass surveillance in France. It has been revealed several years ago, and there's nothing new is going to happen. The technology used to put the whole population, the mass surveillance, are going to evolve. They're going to be more and more sophisticated, but there's nothing new. It's only legal since today.
Only legal since today. Is it a good first start?
It's a terrible first start. I mean, today we killed privacy, and privacy is a really fundamental freedom. And not only did we kill privacy, but we killed trust. By having a government saying to the whole population, I don't trust you, the normal reaction...
Explain that to us. How did they kill trust? How are they killing privacy?
Everybody, under this bill, every French citizen is a suspect of terrorism or many other things. If everybody's...
That's not true. They set up this commission that's made up of parliamentarians and magistrates that's going to...
To analyze an algorithm and a software, you're going to take elected officials. How are they going to do that? Where are the skills? to understand what are those black box. Most of the elected officials have no clue in terms of technology what they're doing. They have no idea what they're doing. They have a vague idea of putting some black box somewhere. They don't know the technology. They don't know the impact. They don't even know and realize that we're selling those technology to many dictatorships all over the planet. And those dictatorships are using it to kill their political opposition.
But Fabrice Appelboin, that survey, it was in a Sunday newspaper that said 2/3 of the French were in favor of the bill.
Absolutely. And Adolf Hitler got elected. I mean, people obviously do not realize the consequences of what is going...
or they're traumatized by the January Paris terror attacks.
I'm not sure the Charlie effect is still in effect right now. It lasted a few weeks, but it's dead now. I mean, most of the people analyzing the Charlie effect agrees that hasn't lasted long.
But we saw a would-be plot recently foiled in the Paris suburbs.
Absolutely, and surveillance didn't help at all. At all. As my colleague mentioned, each and every terrorist who has been arrested or killed was already under surveillance. So there's one thing for sure, surveillance didn't help prevent those terror attacks.
So what kind of a bill do you pass?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't pass a bill that would state that every French citizen is a suspect, because the normal reaction for every French citizen would be to consider politicians as suspect, which is more or less the case. The thing is, how are you going to expect a democracy to survive if citizens consider the politician as suspect and a politician considers citizens as suspect? Democracy is dead with this bill. It's a living dead right now. The French democracy is a living dead. It will end quite soon.
David Nakache, do you agree?
Well, I think that this is a French-speaking channel, and people really need to understand that. I think the French have a very particular relation to the state. They usually tend to trust the state. They usually tend to believe that the state is equitable, that the state is good. You know, when some of the most prestigious diplomas in the U.S. are from Stanford or private universities, here there's this diplôme d'État, the state diploma that approves everything. So there is this idea that the state cannot betray you, or will rarely betray you, and if it does happen, then it's a huge scandal, and people are really outraged about it. So I think.
Do you agree with Fabrice that Tuesday, May the 5th, 2015, will be remembered as the day French democracy was killed?
I think that it is an overstatement, but it depends. Let's say probably a gun was pointed at democracy, but I don't know if the trigger was pulled.
Eva Bloom-Dumontet, we know that you were against the bill. What would you have done differently?
Well, first of all, I think, and that's something that has come across actually when Fabrice and Mr. Akash were speaking, and that was also mentioned in your reportage before. The devil is in the details, and the problem was there was this sort of like veil over this bill on any sort of like technical issues. I think one thing that I found really interesting is that when Manuel Valls originally introduced the bills, he was referring to Imsikacher as dispositif de proximité. He was using this like extremely vague term to talk about something that's, this technical device that's much more privacy invasive than what it is sold out. They sell it as a device that, allow you to intercept phone conversation of a particular target, except in reality, what is an Imsikacher doing? It's intercepting all the phone communications in a given place at a given time. So if you're going to, any sort of business district, for example, you would definitely, or at the parliament, you would definitely be able to intercept the communications of potentially hundreds of citizens around. And so I think and obviously the black boxes are also a perfect example of that,
But Eva, let me just say, the words of the Speaker of the National Assembly before the vote, he seemed to imply that the bill was not perfect, but he said better to have a law than to have administrations acting without any, quote, democratic control.
Well, no, I think having a law to provide and having a legal framework to for the work of intelligence services is absolutely essential. There is no question of that. Now, having one that's extremely vague and that will definitely grant dangerous power to the prime minister. In history, it's never been, it's never proven right to give intelligence power to one person, and that's actually what the case is at the moment. Is that we are granting the prime minister all surveillance power, which we find extremely worrying, and even more so when all the technical details are sort of left in this kind of like absolute vague.
So, Eva, what does it say about France that yours is a minority point of view and a small minority?
I think we have to look at different aspects of it. I disagree with Fabrice when he says that the Charlie Hebdo effect is kind of over now. I think we shouldn't underestimate the fear and the trauma factor of the post-terrorist attack. I think we're still in a point where people, let fear sort of like dictate the decision. And obviously, we all want to avoid a next drama, and we are more inclined to let ourselves to listen to government that tell us that this bill is gonna protect us, it's gonna bring more security, and so that's one aspect of it. I think the other side is that France is often compared to Germany, and the fact that in Germany there's been a much greater position, and I think there's two sides to this. I think in Germany the Green is definitely a strong political force that has always been addressing those issues and advocating against mass surveillance. So I think first of all there was a stronger position within the parliament, which we don't have at the moment. At the moment there is a consensus between both the opposition and
so you're saying that, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because we have to go to the break. You're saying dissenting voices aren't heard in Parliament the way they are in Germany. We'll pick up on that point with Jessica Saltz, who's with us from Berlin when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.